that really cares about the capital gains more so than any of the people that it works for. So I want to end with that, and I know you would have a lot to add to that because that is your area. So I'm going to end with that.
I'll invite you. So can we have a long question and answer session after that? So it's really going to be short, but a lot of time to ask questions afterwards. Yeah.
Thank you all, and especially the organizers. Whenever I find any forum on South Asia, especially South Asian democracy, secularism, and progressive people get together, then I find hope, and I find very important and friendly platform where I can speak very openly. Because we have very common history in South Asia, we have common problems in South Asia, we have common enemies of South Asia, but within people, there are state to state, government to government, there are coordination, and that coordination does not always make people happy and create conditions for a better or peaceful society. But what is very much needed is coordination and unity among the people of South Asia to build and see beyond this present South Asia, to build this secular, free, democratic, peaceful South Asia. So I feel very good when I find any South Asian forum to be there. Thank you again, and thank you for inviting me. I find the French speakers the speech on governments and the situation in Pakistan very similar to Bangladesh, because everything is almost available in Bangladesh, like safety problem, killing workers. There is a huge slums, creating slums and creating poverty, feminization of poverty, and low wage employment in garments. And the garments owners and the linkage of garments owners and the political power, to some extent military, ex-military, and global. This is very important to note, that this global garments industry is not a local industry. Garments industry actually is a global industry. The production is taking place in some countries. So beneficiaries, the sufferers are, the value is created by the workers, and they are the sufferers, but the beneficiaries are spreading across the world. There are beneficiaries and those who are accumulating profits and their interest and benefits, beneficiaries, and the value, surplus value. Those are factory owners, from starting to factory owners to chain store, buying house, and also the states which the garments are being sold. In a calculation, we find that in the US and the European states are getting about 25% of the tax income, revenue income, getting from the total garments coming to the US from Bangladesh. And in that case, if we calculate what the amount United States is earning from the garments coming from Bangladesh is 4 times more than the US is giving Bangladesh as foreign aid. So US is getting more from garments than it is supposed to be a big foreign aid giver to Bangladesh.
So customs duties?
Yeah, customs duty and other all sales duties itself. So this is the phenomenon. So global linkage in discussing corruption and capitalism, I would like to put my emphasis on the linkage between local and global. The global and local. There is a myth. I know that discussion on corruption is very common. Discussion of corruption in countries like Bangladesh. There is a Transparency International, every year they are publishing perception study, and there Bangladesh number of times became the highest corrupt or very number one corrupt country. Nigeria, Bangladesh, these countries were ranked as number one corrupt country. This methodology of this study has some problems which are being need to be discussed, but there is a truth in this, that yes, corruption is a very vicious problem in countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, etc. But the problem is the corruption, the general belief is corruption is the problem, root of all problems. Or when World Bank publish reports on corruption in Bangladesh, they say that if corruption can be reduced, then 2 or 3% of GDP can be increased. So corruption is considered as something isolated phenomena from the structure, from the relation, social relation, economic relation, and also global relation. So therefore, it comes like global South, countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Nigeria, etc. The global South is corrupt, and global North is efficient, non-corrupt, efficient. And within the country, the belief is, and the general belief is, and the public sector is corrupt, and private sector is efficient. So these two, I would like to contest these two arguments, that this cannot be said in an isolated way, that global South is corrupt and global North is efficient. There are truths in this statement, but I would like to point out the linkage between corruption in global South and efficiency and domination in global North. Because the corruption, I remember in the early 1980s, one young man from Switzerland visited our country, and in Dhaka we met, and that I said him that our founder president had a dream. He expressed his dream to build Bangladesh as a Switzerland of the East. He said, oh no, that cannot be. I said, why? This is a beautiful country, and this is a peaceful country. There is no violence. There is a democracy, etc., etc. And he said, you know how Swiss economy is running? Swiss economy depends on all corrupt and criminal money from all around the world. So this linkage, I think, is very important. Who benefits from the corruption of global South? If there was no corruption, then what would happen in global, international, multinational banks and all this funding and all this financial sector? If money accumulated by corruption and different criminal activities in the South, what is the destiny of that money? That destiny is the global North. So there is a theory and there is a belief that the corruption in countries like Bangladesh can be compared with primitive accumulation of capital, concept of primitive capital accumulation in Europe in 16th century, which Marx coined the term primitive capital accumulation. That European capitalism, the development phase, early phase of European capitalism was a primitive type of accumulation took place. That was what? That was occupation, that was a plunder, that was a genocide, all those things we know. In America is a best example for that. So that primitive accumulation of capital is almost a necessary step towards developed capitalism. That is a theory. But the difference between Europe and countries like Bangladesh is very fundamental difference. European primitive capital accumulation took place outside Europe, and that resources were accumulated in Europe. And in countries like Bangladesh, accumulation is taking place, like grabbing, looting, or corruption is taking place within the country, and these resources are taken out of the country. So there is an opposite scenario, and because of this opposite scenario, this global link is, I think, very important. And these corrupt persons, corrupt ruling class, their strength. We have in Bangladesh in the last 40 years, we have different types of government. We have military government, we have civil governments, we have presidential form of government. We had parliamentary type of government, but there are continuity within policies, and there is a common submission to certain rules and policies. There are common friend philosopher guide like World Bank, IMF, and Asian Development Bank. They are common, and sometimes it can be said that permanent government, which government, the elected governments are temporary government. The permanent government are the different, those who are not elected. So this scenario, these things create a situation where corruption gets rewarded by the global power, because that corruption is a necessary condition for selling some projects, making excess of multinational corporations, getting certain benefit when, for example, in Bangladesh, US corporation, World Corporation, Chevron is a very big presence in Bangladesh. They took their business from Unocal, another US company. Unocal took their business from Occidental, another US company. And in the time of Occidental, there was a big blowout in part of Bangladesh. And because of that blowout, the gas resources destroyed. And in addition to that, there was another blowout in another part of the country done by a Canadian company. These both accidents created a huge gas loss, where in Bangladesh gas is a very important, when power crisis is a regular phenomenon. That gas losses equals to $5 billion. $5 billion, and we are yet to be, no government has taken any initiative to make it realize compensation from these companies. So $5 billion Chevron or Nyco type of companies are saved from payment of $5 billion. It is possible because there are corrupt people in the country. So there are beneficiaries of corruption in the global south is highly linked in the global north. This efficiency and this corruption are highly linked. That is, I think, important to know. Another point is public sector and private sector. What is the problem of corruption in public sector? We know that. Problem is people suffer. People suffer from implementing good projects, good infrastructure building, good the necessary power plants, the buildings, highways, public schools, college, hospitals. These all suffer because of corruption. And what happened? People have to pay more. People lack access to hospital health care. People lack access to public education. People lack access to good infrastructure. People lack access to electricity. These all are a result of corruption in public sector. So that was since 1980s. This corruption in public sector is being taken as a major cause for economic reform, especially structural adjustment reform. The main arguments for structural adjustment reform, or in general privatization and liberalization, was the corruption of public sector. And what is the outcome of that reform? In Bangladesh, in India, in Pakistan, everywhere, this structural adjustment program, all this new liberal economic reform went to a great extent. In Bangladesh now, public education system is almost dismantled. Privatization of education sector is a booming sector. Private sector healthcare system, this is a booming sector. Privatization of electricity, privatization of water supply, privatization of gas, all these things happen. What is the outcome for the people? For people, the cost of education increased further. The cost of healthcare increased further. Cost of electricity within this government, in the last 4 years, government has increased power tariff about 5 times, and it will continue to increase because the conditions for increasing power tariff is there. Because the gas, we are compelled to purchase gas from multinational corporations, a very high price, comparatively 5 times price than it is possible by the national company. So since we are paying higher price for getting primary fuel, then production cost of the power, electricity, is getting higher. But the investment in electricity, the private sector is very enthusiastic about increasing tariff of power tariff, so they can have a good business. So this privatization, the main logic was this corruption of public sector is causing public general people is suffering. They are paying more money. They are spending more money to have public services, to get rid of this corruption and to get this public sector free from corruption. Privatization and liberalization took place, and then the cost for the people increased much higher. So my argument is these two, public sector corrupt, private sector efficient, this isolated description, the statement cannot capture the whole reality. Because when corruption taking place in public sector, you know about the Abu Hussein phenomena in Bangladesh, or many corruption cases. When corruption takes place in public sector, who is the beneficiary? Beneficiary is the private owner. And when it is being privatized, who buy it? That person who has the corrupt money. So in both cases they are the beneficiary. And when they send money from countries like Bangladesh, then it is global accumulation takes place. So there is a linkage. I think this linkage and this phenomena is need to be get attention, and it has to be, this corruption phenomena has to be seen as in a larger perspective. Since 1990s, early 1990s, it is also India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. If we go for some figures, then we find that the level of corruption is also increased. In India, there is a recent article published in Economic and Political Weekly. It is saying that in early 80s, in India there was 2 billionaires. What total of $3.2 billion. By 2012, there were 46 billionaires with a total net worth of $176.3 billion. So these decades of new liberal reform created a huge type of unearned money, and these figures are taken from international publications, and it is also said that out of 46, 20 had drawn their primary source of wealth from rent-seeking activities. Rent-seeking activities, that is very fundamental and very booming in these countries. And in Bangladesh it is much more, because in India